Welcome, fierce leaders of the Facebook group. Welcome back for the live today. Today's live is probably going to be short, but I think it's also an important concept that I'm reflecting on lately. When we talk about managing emotions, we usually think about dealing with anger, dealing with unpleasant emotions. We never really talk about what is more than that. And what I also came to reflect on is the concept of vulnerability. And there is actually very few circumstances where we can really attest someone is physically vulnerable. When you're sick, when you have disability, when there is a condition, then there is a factual vulnerability. But sometimes, and very often, vulnerability is something that we feel. And what I was reflecting on is that the concept of feeling vulnerable is actually, it's an emotion, it's something we feel. And actually we attached a story of the behind being vulnerable, feeling vulnerable, that creates an identity, and we hold on that identity. And so rather than acknowledging we're feeling a certain way and then going through that and staying focused on what we can do, what we can create, what we can have an impact on, we're kind of blocked on the fact that we feel vulnerable, and then we create a story behind that, and then the story creates an identity, and we hold on that identity, and then we limit ourselves in what we can do and what we can create. But actually just feeling vulnerable because maybe there is some things going on in your life. Maybe emotionally it's difficult to handle. Maybe mentally you don't have enough space to handle it, or whatever the circumstances can be, you can feel vulnerable through that. And rather than navigating that just simple fact, feeling vulnerable, because we attach the story and then we attach an identity to that feeling, then we don't get out of it. And then you have people creating stories like, oh, I can't do this because I have XYZ problem, or I can't do that because I am XYZ. And so we create story where we're limiting ourselves because at some point we felt vulnerable. And so there is duality in the concept of vulnerability, that we can actually still hold strength and power and resilience while feeling vulnerable. Because the feeling, when we navigate the feeling, when we guide ourselves, when we lead ourselves through that feeling, we let it go through us, then it's just a moment of time. It's just a pocket of time, as I was saying in another video. And so what I see the paradox is between strength and vulnerability, or we associate, usually in history, we thought that being vulnerable means being weak, because maybe someone is sick, or maybe someone has some physical disability, maybe someone has some mental disability, and so they're more vulnerable, and maybe very few tasks they can't do by themselves. And so we were telling they're being weak, being vulnerable is being weak. And the truth is that has nothing to do with being weak or not. Feeling vulnerable is not the physical state of vulnerability. And so even if when you are physically vulnerable, you can maybe be in a position where there's few things you can do on your own, and so you need help, but that doesn't make you weak. And so we need to dissociate vulnerability with weakness, because we need to remember that everything in life is duality and paradox. And so I think for that, the summer is the biggest lesson that I'm learning, integrating at a deeper level, and I want to give forward, is that everything that we are, that we see, that we experience, that we learn is going to be a paradox and duality, and you can be angry and happy at the same time. You can be strong and vulnerable at the same time. And so the concept of vulnerability is not something we need to hide from, not something we need to run away from. When we know that no matter what, when we keep our focus, when we know what we need to do for us, for others, then it's just a moment where we feel vulnerable and that will pass. And no matter what, we keep the focus on what we are here for. And that's a big part of self-mastery in raising consciousness to become that kind of leader that becomes a master of self. Because what can stop you even when you feel vulnerable, you lead yourself no matter what? Nothing. So it's time for us to start learning that, integrating that in our lives, where we embrace the feeling of vulnerability, but no matter what, we're still going to lead ourselves. We're still going to create and to co-create and to build things. So I'll have a masterclass coming by the end of the summer about dealing with high emotions. I will let you know as soon as the waiting list is ready, but as long as you're in a group or subscribe to my newsletter, you'll know and you will not miss anything. I wish you a very good day, and I talk to you soon. Bye.